Hello, folks and friends. Today I'm going to be talking about kind of like the topic of on being the kind of wife your husband enjoys being around or being an enjoyable wife to be around. I thought it was just kind of a fun topic. These kinds of things have been kind of on my mind. My husband and I are going to be going on quite a few trips together in the next little bit where we're just going to be in the car, driving for a significant amount of time. And have been doing that actually, prior to some of the trips we're going to be going on. And I've been thinking about how I want my husband to look forward to be spending that time with me in the car. And I want to set us up for success. I want to set up that time for us to enjoy each other. And so I was just thinking about, yeah, the kind of wife I want to be, and how to be the kind of wife that my husband enjoys being around. Because there's definitely ways that you can be enjoyable to be around and unenjoyable to be around. And there have definitely been seasons where I know I've been unenjoyable to be around. And there are definitely things that you can do and that I have done that I know increase the enjoyment that my husband experiences in terms of being around me. So obviously, I can't speak for all husbands. Some husbands have different preferences, personalities, temperaments, things they mind or actually like. And so some of the things maybe aren't relevant to you, but I think it's still just, a good thing to keep in mind. It's a good thing to pursue. And maybe this will just be a source of encouragement to give your husband some extra loving this week. But I think it's important to pursue that as something, as a caricature in your relationship, is the enjoyment of being around each other. And so I'm just going to kind of go through them and, yeah, talk about each one. The first one is being mindful that my husband is not a woman. And by this, I mean that sometimes I think it can be easy for us as women to treat our husbands like our closest girlfriends. And they may, in terms of their relationship to us and the intimacy, they are closer to us than our closest girlfriends. But just naturally, with the way we interact as women with other women is different and should be different. That makes sense. You're both women versus a man and a woman to be different. And sometimes I think and I have done this, or like when I talk to my husband, it's like I'm talking to him like he's my close girlfriend, where, I'm just kind of like giving so much detail into like this conversation, this or that conversation, maybe talking about some kind of like more materialistic thing, like deodorant or makeup or something like that, where like, my husband doesn't mind me talking about them, and he's never told me that he's, like, annoyed that I'm talking about them, but I'm going to safely assume that those are not the kind of topics that my husband is just dying to talk about with me, and I think that's a good thing to keep in mind because it's really easy sometimes, like, and even if this is just our personality, it's not just, something we do with our closest girlfriends, like how we talk, but it's sometimes can be a trait of women to like tell really elaborate stories and go on tangents and give every single detail and maybe highlight the things that are kind of like vain or like a sense of vanity or careless things. And as much as some of our husbands, or maybe your husband doesn't mind, my husband doesn't mind, I I don't really want to go into detail about that kind of stuff. And I mean, in general, I don't want to, over exaggerate or be over dramatic about how I talk in general. But particularly with my husband, like being aware that like his interests, his threshold for how long he wants to listen to a certain story or topic, depending on what it is, and the things that interest me, like we have different level of interest. The same way that, depending on if he's really into some sort of sport or business topic or something like that, there's a certain amount of threshold for a woman, because just based on her interests, that you don't want to be sitting there like listening to the same thing over and over and over again. Obviously, you do it because you love your spouse, but there's like a certain level of, realizing that the other person might not be as interested in the same things that you are. And that's totally fine and acceptable. And it's actually, it's a twofold thing, right? I mean, it's one person being patient and loving and being willing to listen to the other person's interests and maybe going on about something. And then another person practicing love and awareness for the other by limiting the amount that they're talking about a certain topic. But anyways, in general, like there's other aspects. I mean, I think maybe like what's unique to you and how you talk to your girlfriends, maybe like how elaborate you are, how exuberant or something like that. Like just depending on your husband, there's obviously he should. And, I know my husband loves all parts of me, but like just being aware of also what he's like and being the kind of woman and acting like the kind of woman that I know my husband would enjoy being around because that's important to me. Okay, the next is acting like their presence makes a difference. So sometimes I think it's really easy just to like fall into, you live life with your spouse side by side and you kind of act like roommates and in the sense that, you're both just going about your day doing your own thing. Maybe you talk a little bit, but it's not like you're doing life together where you feel and interact with each other, that you're on some sort of grand mission that you are working towards aligned and unified. And I know for husbands, especially when they come home from work or when they leave from work, like those are two touch points of those last impressions that they leave before they leave the house. And I think not that you should cry when they leave, but I think what should be communicated is that their presence actually makes a difference to your life. So when they leave, that, you respond like, I'm going to really miss you, or I'm going to sad you're leaving, like not that you have to cry about it, not actually like you're sorrowing over it. But that you're actually going to miss their presence. And that I think it's very easy too in the busyness of life. And if your day to day is pretty chaotic, you're with the kids, you're stay at home, or you just have a busy day, like whatever conglomerate of things. Sometimes it's easy to communicate, or sometimes maybe even subconsciously, what's communicated is, I'm sad you're leaving, not because I'm going to miss you, but because I'm going to have less help when you're gone. And so I'm really excited for you to come back, not for you, because I personally enjoy you and I love you and I'm so glad and grateful that you're home. But because now that you're home, I have less on my plate and I'm going to feel so happy and so good that I'm relieved of the duties being solely on me. And I think that's just something to be mindful of because I think it's very easy to also, send your husband off not really feeling like affirmed in who just they are, in that you love them and that you appreciate them not for what they, do, but just that the gift that God has given to you for them to be your spouse. And so I think that's just like an important thing to communicate is that, when they leave, that you're kind of, that you communicate that you're going to miss them and that you hope that they have a great day, obviously. And then also when they come home, that there's celebration and that there's happiness. Again, not for the sake that there's less work, but that you rejoice. You're rejoicing in the fact that your husband has returned home. And I think that that just naturally makes a man feel loved and therefore also enjoy being at home and enjoy being around his family and enjoy being around his wife. Like, this is not even husband specific, like, oh, husbands would really appreciate it. I mean, anybody, women, wife or husband, it doesn't feel good when you come back home and it's like nobody cares that you're home or that your presence doesn't make a difference to the people in your life. And it makes you kind of not really enjoy being there naturally. Whether or not, you should feel that way, like, should you just suck that up and, you know, whatever, Trump on? Yeah, sure, whatever. But I'm just saying, like, on a practical, natural level, it doesn't feel good to come home to a group of people or come home to your family and feel like nobody missed you, nobody cared that you were gone for a certain amount of time. And the only reason why people are excited to see you is because of what you're bringing home, which is your hands and your help. It's kind of like, I don't know. I think that's an important thing to me because I think it's really easy to like get into that when yeah, like, especially as a stay-at-home mom, I'm waiting for my husband to come home. I like, there's, he works my husband works from home, but he sometimes doesn't, like, he kind of is a mix. And yeah, on the days that he's, goes away from home, like, sometimes I have to prep myself before, like, when I see him pull into the driveway, and all the chaos that's kinda going on inside the house before he even steps in the house that I'm aware of, that he is not aware of yet because he hasn't come into the house yet. I kind of have to stop myself, take a deep breath, and be like, "Okay, let's get really excited to welcome dad home," or, come out already, like, to the driveway and give him a big hug and, like, tell him that I'm happy that he's home, whatever shape or form that, looks like for you and your personality. But I do think my husband and I think that's a good point there, like, your husband knows your personality, right? Like, he kinda knows what it looks like when you get excited about things. Same way, like, when you get sad about things or what makes you angry. Or he observes those things, whether, like, subconsciously or not, like, what kinda gives you life and what kinda lights you up. And if it almost kinda seems like he sees you light up and get excited about, this kinda outing or this interaction or whatever thing, and he never really experiences that from you directed towards him, I'm sure even if he's not even conscious of it, like, on a subconscious level, it does affect just how you make them feel and then therefore, like, how much they even wanna be around you. It's kinda like, well, I mean, she doesn't really like being around me. She doesn't seem to enjoy being around me. She doesn't have fun when she's around me, so it's like, well, not that it's not some sort of, like, trade-off or, like, some malicious, like, fairsy squaresy thing, but just, like, on a natural human level, it's just like you're just not inclined to really spend time with a person if you don't really feel like they like being around you. So, I think that's really important to, like, act and communicate that you like and enjoy being around your spouse. And if you don't like and enjoy being around your spouse, I think that's something to work on. I think that's something, even if they in and of itself are not enjoyable to be around or, like, it's a season where they're not enjoyable to be around, like, don't give up on that. Like, don't just let your relationship and your marriage be the way it is just because that's the way it is right now. Everything takes work and, you're not gonna get the kind of results that you desire and, kinda cultivate a kind of relationship, that kind of dynamic if you don't put the work into it. Okay. The next one is, people talk about this a lot, like, just like, "Oh, don't nag your husband." And it's like, that's great, and, like, that's good advice. Don't nag your husband, obviously, and don't nag anybody. Nobody likes being nagged. But what does that concretely mean, like, to not nag? Because I think some people might just, like, I think even when I say it, it's like, it's kind of vague, like, what does that particularly mean? And at least here, when my definition of nagging is just, like, just being on their case in the sense that you're more you're more overly critical, um, unappreciative, criticizing them, kind of making just, like, maybe, like, unaffirming or, like, in your mind, like, it's neutral, but it's not really affirming, so if it's not affirming, it's unaffirming, in my mind. Kinda comments, just kind of, like, a lot of criticisms, and so I think sometimes nagging, the term is attributed to, constantly reminding your spouse to do something or kind of, like, being on a case about a certain thing, but I think it's even in general, like, particularly how you communicate to them. So, in my definition here, I guess I'm referring to nagging as being the kind of way in which you communicate where you're more negative, you're more overly critical about your spouse than you are appreciative of them. I don't even think it really matters to be very clear cut about, like, what's the definition of nagging. But I mean, in general, just thinking about how you communicate and realizing that, yeah, if you're getting negative messaging majority of the time from a person, it makes you less inclined to wanna be around them. Like, if you're just and so this is not nagging in particular, but I'm talking about just the way in which people communicate. Like, if you're with somebody who is, like, constantly gossiping, constantly speaking negatively, constantly criticizing, constantly complaining, constantly just, like, can't seem to find anything in life to appreciate or always have something to kind of, like, be down about, it's not enjoyable to be around that person. And I think wives tend to that a lot because or women tend to that a lot because we tend to be superficial. We're also tend to be petty and overly emotional and sensitive. I'm not saying that you have to be some kind of like robust character where, you don't feel anything and you kind of have to like, yeah, suck it up and act like a man. I'm not saying that. But I mean, I would say objectively on a level of just like pursuing virtue and holiness, I think a lot of the things that like traits and attributes that us women sometimes take on is not women specific, or it is women specific as in it's a tendency of women, but it's not acceptable because we're women. It shouldn't be acceptable because we're women. We tend to it not because it's maybe it's natural for us, but it's as in it's a natural naturally sinful tendency for women to fall into more than a man. And just because it's common doesn't mean that it's normal. And just because something is normal doesn't mean that it's good, right? So I think those things like fall under the category of nagging. Like sometimes it's both parties are kind of like that potentially, like, husband and wife dynamic. Like maybe that is, I could even see a scenario. I'm just thinking about it now where it's like this weird, maybe a weird dynamic where, or not weird dynamic, but kind of like a maybe unhealthy, to some degree where it's like that is how you bond, where you like judge and criticize and, um, like pick apart different people, different scenarios, different interactions and things like that, and that's kind of like how you bond with each other, and that's not really I don't think that's a good place to go from in terms of just like how to cultivate healthy, loving, communication. Because like the reality is, if you and your spouse or you in general talk like that about people or with other people, people who are close to you, if that's how you communicate, where you're just always finding something to nitpick at, then that's naturally just going to bleed into your relationship with each other. And that's not the kind of dynamic that makes it enjoyable to be around each other, because eventually it's going to bite you in the rear end, and you're the one who's going to be it's all fun and games to nitpick other people until you're the one who's being nitpicked at, and then you don't like it, right? Um, so I think that is just something to be mindful and aware of, is just in particular how you talk and how you communicate. There's so many scripture verses in Sirach, in the book of wisdom, just talking about the taming of the tongue, how our words are man's downfall. Because the reality is, what comes out of our mouth is the reflection of what is in our hearts. And so if in your heart you are judgmental, overly critical, unappreciative, ungrateful, that definitely shows in your words. And if you want your husband to enjoy being around you, I think that is something to be very mindful of, and be mindful of the way you talk to other people, to yourself, and to your husband. Because, yeah, those are all characteristics or things that play into it. The next is this little final thing I'm going to talk about. It's very basic, but just kind of asking yourself, are you a drag about life in general? Like, do you love your life? Do you wake up in the morning being absolutely like ecstatic to live your day, um, where you feel a sense of joy and a sense of purpose, and excitement and gratitude for the gift of life that God has given you? Because if you don't, I mean, the reality is, if you are a drag about life, you are probably a drag to be around. That is probably true, because our lives are not isolated, right? Like we don't, well, some people live like this, but I don't think it actually is true, and it doesn't actually play out actually in reality, where, you have your home life, you have your outside life, and you have your friends, and you have your marriage, you have your relationship with your children, you have you know, your career, or like, the friends that you have at work. And yeah, I mean, you can put on different faces in all of those different areas. But I mean, there's a certain point, right, where it's just like you're gonna crack, but also it's exhausting and it's tiring. And, eventually there's gonna be something unauthentic about somebody who kind of lives life in these segregated pieces and is different in all of these segregated pieces. Naturally, if you are not happy and ecstatic about your life and the life that you're living with your husband, like this is not a life you're living on your own. As a married person, you're not living life on your own. You're living life in communion with another person, and then also you're living alongside, like, that communion has created and borne fruit, and so you also have children that you're around too. And if on a regular basis you are not excited to wake up, you're not grateful for your life, and you're not communicating joy to the people around you, well, yeah, it's not gonna be enjoyable to be around. You don't people don't wanna be around you when you're negative and sour and bitter about life or complaining about every little aspect of life. It makes such a tremendous difference. Even the people who are, like, nonverbal about it, but, like, you can just tell by the way that they act, by, like, their just, like, demeanor in general, that, like, you wanna be around those people. Like, you're attracted to the light, you're attracted to the joy, and especially in, like, a home that you're in day to day to day. Like, don't think your demeanor and the way that you act is not going to start permeating kind of, like, every area of your home. It's gonna affect your kids, it's gonna affect your marriage, and then I think, and I don't think this is, like, weird I don't think this is weird to say, but, like, I do think it affects, like, the atmosphere of, like, when people just, like, walk into your home. Like, does it feel like there's life in here? Does it feel like there's joy in here? Does it feel like there's people in this home that love each other? And I think that's just, like, an important thing to keep in mind. It's super basic, but, like, how many of us just kind of, like, walk around dragging our feet about the life that we have, and we just continuously miss the gifts that God is giving us and appreciate, that we have a roof over our heads, that we have children to take care of, that we have a spouse at all, that we're married, that we're in our vocation. I think, there's so many things to be grateful about. There's so many things that, you can make excuses and say, "Oh, well, like, we don't have the house that we want," or, "Yeah, like, this season of kids is a lot," or, "My husband's really busy with work," or, "We're really busy with that thing," whatever. Like, you can just get caught up in the weeds of life and not take the time to just, like, slow down and reevaluate, like, man, like, God has given us so much. I mean, life in of itself, your very existence is a lot. So, anyways, I think those are just, like, some basic things, some things that I thought about. Yeah, again, my husband and I are going on a trip very soon, and we're gonna be spending time in the car together. And I'm already thinking about, yeah, like, what kind of fun topics, like, I'm making a note on my phone, like, what fun topics do we want to talk about? What kind of dreams and goals do we want to talk about? Things that he's interested in that I want to ask him about. Like, just being intentional about pursuing your spouse in a way that is, like, very aware that, they're a gift and that they're not just, like, a given. Like, obviously, you marry this person, you're committing to be faithful, and, the plan is to go in it for the long haul, right? Like, that's the plan, that's the desire, that's the call. I'm just saying that just because you're married doesn't mean, like, a good marriage is a given, The same way, like, just because you're a parent doesn't mean being a good parent is a given. Nothing is a given. Everything takes work. Everything is usually measured the success of a thing is usually measured by how much intentionality, how much hard work you've been willing to put into it, how much investment you've made. And your marriage is one of those things, just like your life in a lot of ways, from your end at least, that you can make a huge impact and a huge difference with by just how you choose to interact with your spouse. And I would encourage that, yeah, like, it doesn't really matter what your spouse is like. It doesn't really matter, if you feel like they deserve it or if you even like being around them. I mean, I would argue it's kind of your duty. It's your duty and your responsibility to pursue your spouse well and to love them well, in whatever shape or form that looks like, and to have them enjoy being around you. I mean, life is also just more enjoyable when everybody's enjoying each other. Is that not true? So, those are some thoughts. Yeah, hopefully it was just, like, some good food for thought, just kind of fun, just throwing stuff out there. And hope it encourages you and encourages your marriage to be all that it possibly can be. Thanks for joining me this week, friends. I'll see you next time. God bless.